in QUT Wombat. Welcome to the session on Regen cities, city, regional and national trends. And as Michelle introduced it, coming out of the last panel, she said, come to the next panel to hear about the rising movement. So my name is Bronwen Morgan, and that energy of rising movement is really exciting to share. And I'm just going to welcome us and then give a very short contextualization. So I'd like to start by acknowledging that I am coming to you from the lands of the Murrururuwa people in the Maroubra area of Sydney, which is Gadigal land of the Eora Nation more broadly. And I'm very grateful to be on that land, which has not been ceded, and pay my respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging, and to any Aboriginal people or Torres Strait Islanders that may be with us today. And in this strangely detached and yet very vibrant online environment, once we get going, I feel the energy starts to spread. So what we've just come out of is a session about well-being economy with a lot of threads about what's going on in government. And I think this is a perfect complement to that, in that we're now turning, it's not that government's absent from us. In fact, there was not talk of local government in the last session. So local government is with us, but it's also very much people from the ground up. So that was present in the last session, but it's like turning the glass around and coming from the bottom up. And I think the switch from regenerative, so for one, a focus on well-being to a focus on regenerative is interesting too. So I'll just in this very, I'm just going to share two very short slides as a super short context of what the different regen movements you're about to hear about from 5 different angles are very broadly focusing on. And that is, here I go, that notion of regeneration, which is really the idea of going beyond sustainability. So I don't know how much that's been discussed in the conference so far. I haven't actually heard a great deal of discussion of it. But one of the commentators on this graphic, there's a pair of people called Reed and Roland who adapted this graphic in 2018, who had a nice accessible way of sort of explaining, if we go along this middle pathway here, that conventional is really just staying within the law. Green is trying to make a little bit less negative impact on the planet. Sustainable is adding no additional harm. Restorative is humans doing things to nature to improve our relationship between nature and human. And regenerative is humans doing things as nature. And I quite liked that particular, I mean, there are lots of other aspects of this graphic that one could focus on. But I think for me, and this may be oversimplistic, but regenerative puts the relationship with nature at the absolute center of well-being. And I thought it was interesting that a lot of that well-being conversation did encompass a reference to environment and nature, but was nonetheless coming in through, let's talk social, not just economic. So now we're moving even deeper into that. And the model that lots of people are bouncing off for this regenerative cities movement is Doughnut Economics. And you'll hear more about that here. This is a super simple reduced version of the Doughnut. And all I'll say here is that it comes from Kate Raworth's 2017 book of the same name. And the idea of the circle with the hole is that we have to say sandwiched within the dough, within that sweet spot. There's lots of cheesy metaphors, or they shouldn't be cheesy, that doesn't go too well with donuts. But we cannot fall below the essential social foundations that are at the center of just keeping us from falling into that hole. And those are correlated with the Sustainable Development Goals in the larger model, nor can we go above the ecological ceiling that is the boundaries of our safe operating space as a planet. And those are set by the planetary boundaries. Now, if you would like to, you're going to hear 5 different vibrant perspectives on how these ideas are playing out at city level, regional level, and national level from the bottom up in Australia at the moment. But also, I encourage people to go back after the conference and link what you hear today to 2 other panels, in particular, the Regenerative Songlines session, which was led by Indigenous people, which talks about regenerative from the place that it came from in the first place, and the model of managing land and people and nature that's been here for so many thousands of years. And also the panel that Michelle led and with Marcus on Regen Brisbane, which lays out some of the Doughnut Economics and the Greenprints, the Australian Greenprints approach in much more detail as a framework of analysis. So what you're going to hear today is probably a little bit less analysis and more a sense of what's happening on the ground. And we're beginning with the people who began the Regen City conversation, Regen Melbourne. And I'm going to ask each of the speakers to briefly explain who they are. Kaj Lofgren, welcome and thank you.
Thanks, Bronwen. Great to be here. So yeah, thanks for that little mini introduction. It's always a nice way to land us in this conversation. So my name's Kaj. I'm born and bred in Melbourne, but I spent much of my childhood in southern Sweden, where my father was from. So I sort of had a split upbringing between the two. I then went on and studied engineering and a history degree, and worked at Engineers Without Borders in Australia for 7 or 8 years as a way of kind of integrating the social justice side of my upbringing with a very conservative engineering education. And then I moved into social impact work through social enterprise and impact investment, which is where I've spent the last decade of my time. And that took me to be working for an organization called Small Giants Academy, which is I guess it's a leadership development organization looking at how we put empathy back at the heart of leadership in this country. And at the height of the pandemic, we started convening our communities around this question of what comes next for a city like Melbourne that was in lockdown for half of last year and half of this year. And what would that mean? What would that look like for the plethora of organizations that we were connected to? And that's where Regen Melbourne, I guess, originated from. We started with a conversation with Kate Raworth and her husband, Roman Krasnarek, in July, August last year. We held a big, beautiful masterclass where we had people connecting in from all around the country. Some of you may have been there. And we talked about, well, if this model is being localized and adapted to many places around Europe and North America, then why not Australia? So we started to convene around this question of, what does Doughnut Economics look like in Melbourne's unique context? So that's what I wanted to chat to you about a little bit. And I'll share a couple of visuals because I feel like that always helps when we're talking about things like donuts. So here's our beautiful city. And the first thing I wanted to show you was the process that we went through. So this is a nice little mind map of, 6 months of work that started almost exactly a year ago. So after those initial conversations, a bunch of organizations, including the Coalition of Everyone, Willow will talk a little bit later, the City of Melbourne were involved, Circular Economy Victoria, and an organization called the Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation. We all got together and we said, well, how about we start with a community engagement process? We start with asking our various communities, what would it look like to adapt a model like Doughnut Economics to our town? And what is our vision for the city off the back of the pandemic experience? And so what you can see here is that community engagement process. Those blue bubbles are big workshops that we held in February this year, all on Zoom, of course, with about, probably between 70 and 120 people in each one. And we were asking questions about what does a healthy Melbourne look like? What is our experience of a connected or an enabled Melbourne? And how can we become a more empowered and ecologically healthy Melbourne? And for those of you who know the Doughnut Economics model a little bit, you'll recognize this language. And the workshops that we designed and that we ran were very much modeled off the experiences of localization of the donut from places like Amsterdam and Philadelphia and Portland. We also did a bunch of leadership interviews, as you can see down there, a diverse bunch of leaders from Melbourne. And then we held around tables where we presented our insights back and got feedback and integrated that feedback before we had a big launch at the end of April with the Lord Mayor and with Kate Raworth at the end of April. And we released this big report, which you may have seen. But what I wanted to show you was, I guess, some of the main outputs and what they've allowed us to now do since the report was released. The first thing we did in that research process was co-produce this vision statement for Melbourne. This is what we think a regenerative Melbourne looks like. And this is based on the contributions of literally hundreds and hundreds of people and dozens of organizations coming together to say, well, off the back of this lockdown experience that we've had, how do we reframe what a regenerative Melbourne could look like? What Melbourne could look like on the other side of this experience? And this is what we came up with, the idea that regenerative Melbourne is knowledgeable, it's full of life, it's affordable and accessible, it's connected through its diversity of cultures, it's inherently collaborative, and it's economic and governance systems, it's democracy, the foundations of our system enable this vision to come to life. And this is both a really beautiful statement, but also carries a lot of weight with our network now. It's sort of our North Star. This is what we're aiming for. And then the second piece that came out of the research was our adaptation of the Doughnut Economics model that Bronwen presented just briefly earlier. And so on the left, you've got the original model that Kate Raworth came up with. And for those who are just coming to this idea, the idea is that this social foundation is made up largely of the Sustainable Development Goals. It's modeled off the Sustainable Development Goals. And then the outer ring, the ecological ceiling, is built from the planetary boundaries, which comes out of work from the Stockholm Resilience Centre amongst the whole coalition of scientists from all around the world. And so we looked at this model, we asked lots of questions in that research process, and what we did was adapt a lot of the ideas that came out of that into this artistic interpretation of the Doughnut for Melbourne. And it's both visually different, of course, and quite beautiful, but it contains some significant alterations or amendments or adaptations that ground this model in Melbourne. And they include things like the inclusion of art and culture as part of the social foundation for our city. And it includes questions around, how do we heal and reconnect to each other and to country as a way of achieving this ecological ceiling and this social foundation. We recognized in the conversations that we had that this is not a technocratic exercise. This is not a scientific exercise. This is a deeply community-led and relational exercise that we need to go through as a city. And of course, country sits at the heart of that. So this is just a quick introduction, but I guess what you can see here is both the, a psychological and a relational interpretation of the Doughnut, but also, as I said before, with the art and culture inclusion, quite a significant shift to how it was developed in the UK. And we feel like that lands the model in Melbourne really nicely. So that was the second element that came out of the research. And the final element was the roadmap. So this was 12 steps that the community came up with, where we said, if we want to achieve this, if we want to make it more than just a piece of research, then what are the steps that we would take as a community? And you probably can't read this. I'd be happy to share the slides afterwards, but basically they're made up of 3 different themes. The first theme is, how do we take this beautiful model and add metrics and measurements to each one of these segments? How do we activate the model? The second bunch is all around further community activation. How do we run more forums, more community initiatives, connect with local governments? And so that makes up that community activation layer. And then the final layer is, well, if this has been a research project, it's not going to continue to just be a research project. What we've actually developed is a network. And so how do we activate that network? How do we build governance systems around that network that are fit for purpose? Which is really what brings us to the next phase. So since the report was released in April, we've gone through a process of reflecting on, well, how do you transition what was really a nice summer project in the midst of incredible conditions where everyone was locked down? How do you take that idea and all the energy from that space and the outputs of the research and make them inputs into something that is long-lasting and deeply impactful for our town? And that's what we've come up with over the last couple of months. Our thesis here is that Melbourne lacks a place or a platform for deep cross-sector collaboration. There is great collaboration in our town. Many of you who are from Melbourne or know Melbourne well would know that there's amazing institutions and actors doing incredible work around ecological sustainability and regeneration and around social impact. But what we lack, and I think many cities lack, probably most cities lack, is a space for systems level or cross-sector collaboration that goes beyond the themes or the sectors that you're working in. And that's the layer that we think Regen Melbourne can bring. That's the gap that we want to fill. And as you can see, here's a bunch of the organizations on the website. There's obviously the full list and you can take a look there. But I guess what I wanted to say on that is just that there is a real diversity of actors here, from large organizations and corporate all the way through to small social enterprises. And we have a bunch of individuals, of course, who aren't connected to organizations. So we see Regen Melbourne as a network both for individuals and for organizations. And the last thing I'll say, hopefully time-wise it's okay, Bronwen, is we have these 4 areas of work that we're thinking of focusing on. And we came up with these by looking at the roadmap and saying, well, what are the skills that we need to achieve this, or to at least take steps in this direction? And these 4 themes are hopefully quite obvious, continuing the research work that we've been doing using the Doughnut and surfacing insights, supporting systems level projects that can demonstrate what we mean when we say take Melbourne into the Doughnut, changing the narrative of recovery through a big storytelling initiative that we're putting together, and then this idea of convening and coming together in unique ways to build alliances around our work. So this is a sort of map, I guess, of where Regen Melbourne is heading to now. And we're in the middle of the transition from research project to network. That's the work that we're all doing behind the scenes at the moment. And the last thing I'll say is that as part of that work, we're now recruiting for a community lead. to join our little team to support this network going forward. So I might pop that little link in the chat too, so you can have a look at what we're looking for there. But that might be enough, Bronwen.
Yes, fantastic, Kai. Thank you so much. We're getting warm feedback on the graphics, and this is a great story. And it's a time to turn to Brisbane, who took up the cudgel. I guess everybody was doing it sort of at the same time, but this is the order in which the public-facing events emerged. So, Michelle, please tell us about Brisbane.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Kai. Welcome again, everybody. It's lovely to be a presenter instead of just a facilitator. So what I wanted to show you what I've been up to in Regen Brisbane. I hope you can see my slides and hear me okay. So first of all, I'd like to acknowledge country. I'm on Yagara Turrbal lands here in North Brisbane, Meanjin, and I'm excited to tell you about what Regen Brisbane has been up to. And I'm speaking on behalf of many other folks, including my co-conspirators with the NENA conference, Marcus Foth, Kira May, James Lee, and many others of us here in Brisbane. So to recap, in a nutshell, Regen Brisbane is actually being built on the scaffolding of a system called Greenprints that myself and others have been working on within AELA for about 5 years. But what we did was we were very inspired by what Regen Melbourne did. So we picked up that framing and thought, let's see what we can trigger here in Brisbane by using the Doughnut as a catalyst, but by actually using this system we've been working on for years, which goes a little more deeply into the bioregional and natural systems that a city or a community is part of. So what we've done so far, we had a beautiful event, a launch event on the 29th and 30th of July, and the recordings from that event from the 29th are all on the NENA website, and I can share the links. We've had since 2 follow-up events, and we've got a nice growing core group of folks. The big thing that happened literally the week before the kickoff event was that the Brisbane 2030 Olympics was announced. So now there's this huge focus on the Olympics. So we're going to try to dovetail into some of those initiatives. Many people are against the Olympics. Others want them to be the greenest they've ever seen. Either way, we want to come and play in that space and bring more folks. To date, we've got folks from University, QUT and UQ keen to be involved and to support activities. Using the Doughnut as an internationally known kind of system and an exciting and growing space has been really wonderful. But what I wanted to just tell people about as well is the Greenprints approach, which is an Aussie-based approach, which I designed while I was coming out of my cancer treatment back in 2015, 2016, before I came across Doughnut Economics, is just a deeper way to basically imagine the Doughnut and then deeply rooting it into place. Because that's the Doughnut, ecological ceiling, social foundation. This is the Greenprints Doughnut. It's not just a living space for all of humanity. It's thinking about the living space for the whole Earth community. And it's not just thinking about the ecological ceiling and trying to downscale it. It actually starts with local place and not just the humans, what we live on, where we live, how we connect. And in Australia, the Doughnut's, the Greenprints approach is deeply informed and created in partnership with some of our Indigenous elders, like Mary Graham, bringing the relationist ethos and the law of obligation into the conversations about how we live within our place, within our limits, and become good citizens of the globe as well. So very quickly, we gave a talk about Greenprints in the Wellbeing Economy Week. I can't remember which day that was, Wednesday or Thursday, and I'll share the website with you if you want to know more. And I'm really excited because Regen Sydney, Regen Newcastle, and a few other groups are already offering to sign up with MOUs to use the Greenprints approach, as well as connect with the Doughnut. And the reason it's important to us within NENA that Greenprints is connected into work is that the auspicing of NENA was built from this Earth-centred worldview. The Australian Earth Laws Alliance auspiced and helped build and is continuing to be a partner of NENA's work. So the Greenprints vision is very broadly about creating regenerative human societies, but with a strong focus of living within ecological limits. And we deliberately use that framing of ecological limits to avoid greenwashing. We don't want people playing with the concept of we can have whatever we want, so long as we make it a bit greener. We want them to actually look at place and to understand the bio-regional and biophysical limits and realities of our capacity. So the beautiful banner that an artist created for us, we wanted to represent the beautiful future we all want. But the cool thing about Greenprints and the way I can tell the story quickly is it's really all about, and has spent 5 years bringing together all the multidisciplinary approaches that humanity has tried to build, whilst building on the foundations of the relationist ethos and learning from and showing solidarity to Indigenous peoples, and really trying to make it easier for all of the groups who've been coming to AELA over the years saying, we get what we have to do, but we have no idea how to do it. How do we force the government to do this? How do we help our communities to do that? Which tool is best for measuring our footprint? So Greenprints basically offers some steps. I know that's corny and a cliche, but when it comes to the wide variety of things you can do, people have to take one step and another step and then come back and keep going. We find people get very confused, and the whole point of a circular economy is to go round and round. What we're arguing within Greenprints is you have to bed that circular economy into a place. You've got to find some roots and link it to place. So Greenprints is
2 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. We're always talking about going round and round. It's like, but hello.
2 minutes.
Where's the boundary? I mean, even Eleanor Ostrom talks about boundaries. Did you say I've got 2 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
That's fine, doll. Greenprints is a process and an output. And what we've been working on inside the Regen Brisbane process is how we show folks that it's just one part of the story, and we have to define our boundaries, understand the ecology that we live within, and then understand human activities inside that space. So it's really absolutely awesome. And the scenario building, the collective decision making, the role for citizens' assemblies, the role for showing people that they can create a different future, but it can't be shallow. It must be deeply rooted within place. And we have to rearrange our whole democratic system as well. Because unless we have more people involved in things like citizens' assemblies or processes to articulate not just the future the human beings want in terms of their health and their happiness, but what's acceptable in their living areas. Do we want mining? Do we want large-scale land clearing? Or can we look at integrating economy into the existing scientific processes we already have to make a better future? All of the work is already done. For 30 years, we've got NRM bodies, land care groups, all of these other groups doing amazing work. The reason it's taken Greenprints a while to pull it all together is there's just so many cool things. I love the fact we often say that all models are wrong, some are useful. The Greenprint steps give you something to stay sane while you go on the journey of all of this stuff that Westerners throw at you, all these new terms and frames. But what we say ultimately is the steps keep you sane, but there is no snail of destiny. You go round and round, you find your right way, you reach out to people, you come back, you go over it again, you reach out to people, you come back. So we're excited that Regen Brisbane and hopefully Regen Sydney and Newcastle are going to connect in with the work. Greenprints is now being used as the scaffolding. We're working with a bunch of schools. We're working with lots of different community groups are keen because they can see the use in having a tool that takes an analysis of, wow, this is where we live. This is what it used to look like. And that's where the city is. How do we actually start unpacking what human beings are up to and how we can fit in a much more sympathetic and appropriate way into a place, whatever that place looks like. So that's all I wanted to share with you. There's tons of work under each step. We're super excited to be exploring all of these issues inside Regen Brisbane and beyond. And hopefully I didn't go over time.
Only by seconds. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Bronwen.
Thank you so much. It's actually, that's an apposite point when we're looking at how the Greenprints is, both Kai and Michelle have referred to local adaptation of the Doughnut's model. And it's worth referring, I'll put the link in the chat in a moment, to the fact that everybody taking this model is adapting it in some way locally. And that's quite exciting to see globally what people have done. New Zealand has done something quite specific. And Kate Raworth herself is very emphatic about, in fact, she tells the story as this has happened by people coming and asking for a way to use it rather than, it's the opposite of a franchise with a patent on the intellectual property or the business model, essentially. So I think that's really important way of something spreading and replicating. It's a regenerative replication in itself. So now we go to the opposite of a virus spreading from city to city. Kieran Kashyap from Sydney, Regen Sydney, please tell us.
G'day everyone. Yeah, so awesome to see all your beautiful faces today and hear about all the initiatives from around the country. Yeah, excited to share about the Regen Sydney story. I'm aware a lot of you might not know me, so just real briefly, one of the conveners of Regen Sydney with a background in industrial design, realised that was definitely the wrong path and learnt a lot about how it was part of the problem worked towards permaculture design, grew an interest in systems transitions, currently working in as a strategic designer at the Design Innovation Research Centre at UTS, and doing a PhD in transition design focusing on earth-centered economies. And obviously thrilled to be part of this, this movement. I'll just start with sharing screen, and I'll do a quick acknowledgement of country. So hopefully it's coming through. Yeah, I'm here on the country of the Gadigal people, in a place known as Ballinaming, and I pay my deepest respects to elders past, present and emerging. And like so many others have echoed through this conference, there's the wealth of tens of thousands of years of regenerative Aboriginal cultures here in this place from which to learn and grow. So what is Regen Sydney and how did the journey begin? Around August last year, Kate Rayworth held a workshop, actually hosted by Small Giants, where Alice put up a hand and said, yep, I'll help to convene and gather some people around the idea of a regenerative Sydney. And over the next 15 months to this moment now, our network's just been growing and our community practice has only been growing, while we have a beautiful organising crew of the 6 of us there, helping to develop the strategy and build our community as well. And in this time, over 200 people have joined our mailing list from across sectors, academia, policy, built environment, and not to mention the 100 people on the Regen Sydney Mighty Network platform as well, who are actively contributing to the ongoing conversations and participating in our very much emergent approach to exploring Doughnut economics in Sydney. We recognise a huge amount of energy that surrounds the Doughnut economic model around the country and the world, where it's been adapted and contextualised to the local conditions and needs. I'm saying this like Michelle and Kai have already echoed, this isn't about implementing some prescriptive or top-down version of the Doughnut, and we very much see this as an opportunity to adapt and test the Doughnut in the Sydney context in a way that's fundamentally bottom-up, looking to channel the voice of our communities, both human and non-human, towards the shared intention of regeneration. And through our initial explorations, we've come to articulate our guiding purpose, which is to reveal and communicate opportunities for systems-level economic transformations. And we believe Regen Sydney can help to connect the dots of the countless projects, regenerative projects that are already happening, and help to create space for more. And over the next 6 months, our mission is to investigate the appropriateness and adaptability of the model to Sydney's context, develop preliminary community insights around a regenerative future for Sydney, and to harness the value of a network-based collaborative methodology to surface findings and recommendations for the road ahead. And obviously, we're keenly tapped into the other initiatives, learning from Melbourne and Brisbane and so on, and the deeply collaborative processes in Melbourne and the ecocentrism of the Greenprints model that Michelle's just talked about. In August, we had a First Bite event where we were able to kind of put front and center our relational approach and our attempt to build connections and relationships first. Here we had 115 people from diverse walks of life and from the many various parts of Greater Sydney. And it was a really energetic and vibrant session. Jess Scully, our Deputy Lord Mayor of the City of Sydney, was there sharing her insights, and breakouts participants were brainstorming potential collaborations and describing collective visions for the future. And obviously, let's not forget that this took place right in the thick of COVID lockdown. It was a really challenging time. Structural inequalities were really apparent. It didn't seem like there was an end in sight, but in a way, this event was a beacon and kept us going. And there we also had, we were really lucky to have Biripi artist Jason Wing. This beautiful mural that he painted in collaboration with Dennis Golding and Lucy Simpson gave us a bit of a provocation while he was there as well. And he said, we all benefit in some way, shape or form from Aboriginal culture and from colonisation. So it's important as individuals to use our strengths and talents to further Aboriginal culture, awareness and education. How can we turn the gift of what we each thrive in towards empowering Aboriginal culture? And to his point, it's so important that this vehicle of Regen Sydney is firmly centred in a decolonising approach. And this is, and of course, this is where colonisation began in Botany Bay after all. And so we're trying to form partnerships and relationships that could help us with this. The vision roadmap you see here is drawn by Fern Luca, captures a lot of the dynamics we're playing with at the moment. Over the next 3 months, we'll have completed ecosystem mapping of the existing regenerative initiatives in the Greater Sydney region. Our intention after that is to graft onto that understanding with community engagement workshops and industry roundtables in the first quarter of next year that delve deeper into what it will take to transform our economy, leading to better measures for progress and to create space for actual tangible projects and partnerships. There's also the question that we're holding at the moment of localising the Doughnut even further and enabling smaller regions of Sydney to explore the Doughnut in a more place-based manner, and how we can do that and the timing of that. In the meantime, we've also got fortnightly Regen cafes to keep the conversation going in our Māori network community. And we've also made a contribution to TEDx Sydney, which you'll be able to watch in a few weeks. It's clearly still early days yet for Regen Sydney, but we're walking the path forward with urgent patience. Thank you.
Thank you. I love that, urgent patience. Thank you, Kieran. And I was thinking while you were speaking, there's a kind of rhizomatic structure to this, because there's a lot of dialogue across these different initiatives, as you can hear threads of that. And Kieran's beautiful graphics actually animated Melbourne's conversations. And that's what I think first led to me finding Kieran and Alice. And so, yeah, there's a mycelium underneath this. And we're moving now to a sort of a different angle on it altogether, with Claire Marshall, who's in fact one of the Sydney co-conveners as well, but has been working out in the regions with World Wildlife Fund in interesting ways on regeneration. Claire. And you may be on mute.
I just unmuted myself. Okay, I'm just going to share some slides with you guys. So I'd like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you guys today from Bundjalung country. I'm up in the Northern Rivers, and this is one of the beautiful things. This picture is of Wollongong, which used to be called Mount Warning. And it's actually the edge of a ring of volcanoes that last exploded 23 million years ago, last erupted 23 million years ago. And it always makes me think about time in a different way when I see that. And to think that also this area has had such rich culture for so many tens of thousands of years. So I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging of this region. So quick little bit about me. I dug out this photo. I thought I would show you because it's a bit funny. I've had an interesting career that started off with being a ballerina. I then gave up that and went and did economics at university at Curtin. I actually fell in love with economics, which seems like a kind of a strange thing after being a ballerina, but I really, really loved it. But there were a few things that didn't quite make sense to me about economics that only made sense years and years later. I then gave up economics. I went and worked in TV, worked as a TV director for a long time, and then in development, because it seemed to me that stories are sort of this very important part about how we understand the world. And I've now ended up at UTS, where I teach futures thinking. I'm designing lots of units to spread futures thinking across lots and lots of students, which is very exciting. And I'm doing a PhD, of course, because I think you can't start working at university and not end up going down that path. And I think part of the reason why I ended up doing a PhD in futures and why my PhD is really focusing on regenerative futures is I have 2 little children, and everybody probably has a photo or a memory of this time. I just signed up to do my PhD, and I have to admit it was pretty frightening, the wide-scale bushfires that we had and how it affected sort of everyone. And during this time, I'm quite friendly. I'm good friends with the head of impact investment and innovation at WWF, Reece Proudfoot. We were messaging each other all the time. And I was like, what are we going to do about this? You know, this is a really frightening state of affairs. And what Reece was saying was even more frightening from where he was, which is down in the Southern Highlands, was he was starting to hear these conversations about people saying that, well, things have burnt. The safest thing that we can do is bulldoze it all and build back better, you know, build back new things. And he and I had these deep, long conversations about how do we possibly counter this narrative? How do we do it? And so what reminded me was this idea that when I had done economics years ago, there were 2 things that never made sense to me. The constant growth goal, like weren't economies designed by us? Like, why did we design them in such a way that they didn't work for people? And what was this value of consumer confidence that seemed to affect economies really badly? Because my lecturers never seemed to be able to understand that to me. Obviously, I found out the goal part when I read Doughnut Economics. Thank you, Monique Potts. She introduced it to me, and I think I still have her copy, which I'm definitely not giving back. But the other thing that I found sort of recently is this idea of narrative economics, which is the narrative that we live in affects our behavior. What we believe affects our behavior, which has a huge, big impact on the economy. And so part, I think, of this work that I'm really interested in with Regen Sydney and with WWF is just changing the narrative to be one of regeneration, which obviously links so tightly with futures thinking, because if we want to think about the future in any way that's useful, 100 years, 200 years, 7 generations, then we need to think about regeneration. So WWF already had this platform called Impactio that they've been working on for a few years, which how they sort of saw it was this, it would kind of connected lots of startups and people who had ideas to tackle sustainable development goals and people who were doing impact investing. And there was this sort of problem that they saw where it was hard to qualify what projects were worth funding. So Impactio, what they set up was a platform where startups and ideas could go and list their projects. They would then get advice from experts and they would end up being kind of qualified, if you like, by the platform. So just after the bushfires, we had a meeting. I had a meeting with Reese and the producers of 2040, Damon Gameau and Anna. And obviously, I hope everyone here has seen 2040. It's a really beautiful film. And we started talking about, well, how could we change this narrative after the bushfires, and threw around a lot of ideas. But the one that really stuck was the fact that 2040 still felt quite far away. And some of the ideas talked about in that were really big. Maybe there was a use case of creating a new film that was the bridge in between, a film set in 2030. But this time, it was a film that wasn't a whole film that you would watch, but a part of the film with the idea that the people watching the film would go on to create the rest of the film to 2040. So what that idea ended up being is WWF's Innovate to Regenerate campaign. So this was going to be launched kind of now, but obviously the second wave of the COVID pandemic has thrown that into turmoil because no one really felt like coming and having big gatherings, or even lots of places couldn't. So it'll be launched in February next year, which we think will be quite good timing. And the idea is really to empower Australian communities to drive regeneration and help create a world where humans live in harmony with nature. And really, this is kind of the same as the Regen work. And like, I sort of feel like I'm kind of on two sides with Regen Sydney and with WWF. In Regen Sydney, where people are coming to us because they believe in these concepts and ideas, and that work is building the network to then get to projects. WWF is going on the different side, which is getting people who may not be familiar with this stuff, but who are interested in WWF as a brand and getting funding for their projects and introducing them to ideas of regeneration and maybe a little tiny bit of Doughnut Economics. So I just want to, do I have 2.5 minutes left, Bronwen?
Yes, you can have the extra half a minute.
Okay, so I'm just going to play, I think this is a nice sort of summary and a nice little video of the project, what's trying to achieve.
This could be our future. A hopeful society, together pulling back from the brink. But if we want this, we have to start now. So, how do we get here? WWF's Innovate to Regenerate is a multi-year program which aims to future-proof Australia by supporting regenerative, community-led solutions that encourage impact investment in areas like food, biodiversity, and energy. By supporting an alliance of communities, investors, councils, businesses, universities and innovators, we are establishing a powerful network equipped to regenerate Australia, and you are invited to be a part of it. Regeneration goes beyond sustainability. It actively reverses environmental degradation, healing people and planet. So, how will we achieve this? Together with Regen Studios, we're creating a short film, a compelling vision of a better Australia by 2030. This includes supporting hundreds of distributed screening and design workshops around the country to build a thriving regeneration network. At the same time, we're amplifying community-led regeneration by supporting local communities and experts to establish regenerative projects, from organic waste processing facilities to regenerative agriculture and renewable energy cooperatives. Finally, using these projects, we're building an impact portfolio. WWF will provide $2 million in seed funding and will collaborate with investors and donors to help the best ideas get the support they need. The projects we support will deliver measurable social, environmental and economic benefits to communities around the country. Together, we'll support Australians to discover creative solutions to our current crisis from the ground up by harnessing our national character of determination, hard work and passion for Australia's natural ecosystems. We're promoting the regeneration of the entire country. And it starts now.
Thank you, Claire.
No problems.
So from that, we go to another sort of cross-country weaving from a slightly different angle, perhaps more community-led. Perhaps Willow can elaborate. I mean, not that an NGO isn't community, but there's all types in this patterned tapestry. Willow.
Indeed, and thank you so much, Bronwen. I'm still feeling the impact of the power of that film. So thank you so much. That was extraordinary. Hello, good afternoon. My name is Willow Berzin, and firstly, thanks, Bronwen and the NENA crew for having me here today with you. I pay my deep respects to the Wurundjeri people on whose land I work and play in Melbourne. It's an absolute hoot to be here with my fellow panelists this afternoon. A bunch of folk I've barely met in real life, many not at all, many just, well, actually, I think Kai, I've met you maybe 3 times in real life in the past 1.5 years, and we work relatively closely together, I think. And I just love everyone to bits as we're working and learning together in our regen efforts. I might just share my screen. Bear with me for a second. And can you see that okay? Yep, yes. Cool. So yeah, basically I'm a designer and I love ideas, potential and connecting people. One of the reasons we started with the Coalition of Everyone, is it's a big idea, it's got a lot of potential, and it's about connecting people, specifically for this time that we're living in and where the planet is calling us to regenerate her place by place. Coexist to build and repair democracy, and as a coalition with a very specific purpose to redesign our local economies democratically. And we do this using participatory and deliberative practices, spreading collaborative decision-making tools far and wide, and with a focus on ensuring that we're including unheard and marginalized voices in this time of what we could call the Great Transition. I just want us to zoom out for a moment and think about, actually, I've got the wrong slide order, there we go. That was what I was just talking to. Let me start here. So I just wanted to zoom out for a minute and just to sort of think about from the sort of the moonshot view, I suppose, understanding these entwined social, political, economic and environmental interconnected ecosystems that we live in, and that the need for democratic renewal is to enable and empower us to redesign the systems that we need to place care and curiosity into the heart of this systems reboot that we're all here and sort of interested in. And forgive the altitude, but I'm now going to zoom to this image, which I think quite clearly captures the existential threat that we're all sort of looking at and feeling and a part of. And it's like there's this huge thing coming at us, and it can be quite terrifying, and we're living in a period of great uncertainty. I think another image, just to zoom us into some context, and in an Australian-wide context, but with this kind of global awareness in mind, is this image from the Burning documentary of the 2019 and 2020 fires. I'm not sure I'm strong enough to watch the film at the moment. It just, the image alone, I feel it in my body. I feel this threat. I feel terrified, and that kind of panic that comes. And I think there's this really interesting time that we're living in. And as Claire and others say, that this is ultimately about narratives. And there's this battle between narratives that's going on. And so I've been thinking about these two different narratives that exist. Well, there's 7 billion plus narratives happening. However, there's some dominant narratives. And they exist as very different calls to action. There's the climate emergency and extinction, which is a sort of a red threat fear. And then there's this idea of regenerative futures, which I think is something that in my body I feel differently. And even if you just all to take a minute, just to notice that in yourself, how it is that you respond to these messages, and even just what it evokes. One is fear, and it can be really paralyzing. And I think the other one is really hopeful and actually quite energizing. And that is the point of this and where we are at the minute. So I think what we are is in this time now, in relation to the global pandemic, it's like we're living in a unique portal of time. It's a transitioning time. It's full of fear and uncertainty, but equally opportunity and hope. And it's like none before that we've ever faced. I'll just read a quote here from Milton Friedman. Only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. And when that crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depend on the ideas that are lying around. That, I believe, is our basic function, to develop alternatives to existing policies, to keep them alive and available until the politically impossible becomes the politically inevitable. And so what I'm here to just sort of share a bit about is, as well, there is this growing regen place-based movement building around Australia. Some of the cities that you've heard from already are starting to get more established. Some are highly emergent. It's just people stepping into roles going, oh, can I do this too? I can do this too. And it's a really exciting and energizing movement that is growing. And I think in this time it's been catalyzed. It's sort of no coincidence that it's happening now. It's a place-based movement to redesign our economies locally and democratically, and to align our economies with living systems in service to people and planet, not profit. Every place is and will be unique, and at different stages in this emerging movement, this group is a co-learning and co-sharing group. And so we don't need to reinvent the wheel from scratch every time somebody steps into place, in a place and steps up as the movement grows. I'm not sure if you know the song, the Gil Scott-Heron song, "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised." And what we at Co think is really interesting is the idea that the revolution will be facilitated. And this is about facilitators who are trained to hold safe and protected spaces. And yes, it could be facilitating and/or / convening, as many of the people here are actually conveners too. For all voices to be heard equally, enabled to make collective decisions for our common goals by using participatory and deliberative democratic practices. So just to end on, at the Coalition of Everyone, we're working on an online course on how to facilitate the regenerative economy. And we want people like you all here around Australia, all the world, to be able to hold spaces where people can imagine what their regenerative vision might be, and so that communities can come up with a tentative destination rooted in place, in country, and in time. And so this is also an open invitation to everyone here and anyone else you might know who you could think might be interested in joining this new course with us to regenerate where you live. And so we'd love it if you wanted to be a part of the first cohort, which are limiting to 50 people. It should be later in the summer, early autumn, to try out the course and let us know how it worked for you. I'll drop an email in the chat if you're interested. Just please ping us, and we'll be in touch with more information about it soon. And that's it. I just think there's this hopeful chance that we're living in at the minute, and it's really about regenerating the future. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Willow. And thank you to everybody for a wonderful tapestry. And you know, Willow, as you were speaking about that, the different, or asking us to sort of feel the different bodily energy of the two types of messages. I've been struck listening to other presentations in this fabulous conference that, and there was one in particular, a woman who spoke with the Regen Brisbane thing yesterday, Delwyn, about the technicalities of life cycle assessment and how you can adapt them for regenerative economy work. And she was really down in the weeds of you know, these technical professional routines that are so hard to shift, that we heard about, especially for the government, being so sticky. And yet what she left me most of all with was the quality of her work changes utterly when she changes the focus to benefits and hopeful futures, even if it's really technical and down in the weeds. So we're giving you broad brush overview of these exciting movements here, which is the part where it's relatively easy to inspire. But I think there's such a great potential for making the sticky, dirty, slow, difficult, and often conflictual work at the routine level of changing how we actually do things on the ground, all the way down, to make that good too. And that's what you hear through the cities that have gone further down the path. The Amsterdam deputy mayor, she has construction people calling her up saying, I figured out a new way to meet your carbon emissions caps for our building regulations. And people feel energized all the way down, not just today listening to this fabulous lineup. So that was what I wanted to just add to my sense of, you know, what we're all getting from this. So we are technically supposed to finish now, but Michelle has given permission for, you know, we could go till 1 because there is a short lunch break, or till, sorry, I'm in Sydney and I'm very place sensitive. So for those of us in Sydney and Melbourne till 1, for those of us in Brisbane till 12, and for those of us in Perth, I can't work it out off the top of my head. But if anybody would like to just jump in with a reaction, a question, or a comment, we do have a few minutes. We've had mostly comments in the chat, I believe, but
yeah, if people would like to write a question in the chat, I've been watching it. It's sort of ingrained into you once you've been hosting a conference for 4 days, even though I'm a speaker as well.
And we don't have to have anything either. We're absorbing a morning's worth of.
Okay, I have a question.
Great.
Nicholas has asked, how do the processes of forecasting and backcasting interact? What a great question. It's all about scenario planning and futures. Who'd like to answer that one? Claire, I think, is our futurist.
Sure. Look, really good, interesting question. So I think, look, from my research and from my point of view, when we look at forecasting, a lot of the forecasting that we do, if you think about, we do trend analysis. Trend analysis is based on the developing or changing of historical data. So given that we know that things are changing quite rapidly, often trends cannot be the best thing to use to do forecasts, especially if we don't understand the relationships between the data that is creating those trends. Also, when it comes to forecasting and futures, sometimes we get stuck in these narratives, such as a narrative of continued growth, and that can influence our forecast. So I always try and work for the point of view of, like, what is the future that we would like to imagine? What is the regenerative future for this place that we live in? And what do we have to aim for? Of course, then once you've got that vision, that beautiful regenerative future, then it's a process of simple backcasting of how do we get there? And, you know, there's lots of different methods you can use, from steep or pestle, to kind of break down those different steps. But really, I like to think about it in terms of what is the impact that we can make as an individual in our family unit, in our kind of sphere of community, and then in our system, and try to think about what are the things that we can do in each of those spheres that will lead us towards that regenerative future that we think about.
Thanks, Claire. We have a question from Sue Stack about how do you start, or what helps to get something started from nothing. Does anyone on the panel feel like Melbourne in some ways began from nothing?
I can jump in, and I think Willow probably has some reflections on this too, given she's been nurturing some very emergent conversations in other parts of Australia, particularly in I guess remote and regional parts. I think we benefited in Melbourne from a kind of cluster of organisations from very early on, and it was really just a conversation about what was the first steps that we could take I also think it's interesting in the Australian context. I think we're taking quite a different track to many other parts around the world that are playing with Doughnut Economics in particular. In the examples that you'll find on the Doughnut Economics Action Lab website, which someone can put in the chat so we can have a look at it, they're very often quite top-down approaches. So there's small clusters of people who are engaging with local governments in conversations around policy. And I think that's a wonderful thing and a necessary thing. But I think you've probably seen from the examples today that from all of us, I think, are taking a very much a community approach to first looking at whether these models are appropriate or relevant. And if they are, then how do we adapt them together before we then have conversations about influencing organizations or policy or anything else that might be our aims after that point. So I think that's a wonderful culture here in this conversation around starting where we are and starting in the communities where we exist and having conversations there before we think about, some of the other changes we might want to see. But Willow, did you want to just reflect a little bit on some of the conversations you've had with particularly smaller places around Australia?
Yeah, thanks, Kai. Where to start? I mean, look, I've got the personal context, which is, I think, it's like a learning developmental process, and a lot of listening and talking to people is a really good place to start. As I think it's Kate Raworth says, follow the energy. It's like if you're talking with somebody and something leads to something else, just follow it. If it lifts you up, if it excites you, follow it. If you're finding your head butting into a business as usual or closed system, step away and go, well, that's what I do. It's like, okay, let's go over here. I think as well, there's something about not waiting for permission from somebody to tell you what to do and just kind of following your own instincts and energy. I'm not sure if that's helpful, but I think then like the emerging Regen Australia movement, if we could call it that, I don't even know exactly what it is yet. It's a group of people who are coming together to kind of learn and share together. That's come from just having conversations and sharing the stories that are existing. And there's places in different levels, and someone in the group is like, I've just been thinking about this, I'm on my own, I'm in a sort of a more remote community. It's like, that's cool, it doesn't matter, it's just start where you are.
And I think that too, thanks guys. The question about how do you start something, it's just so diverse, because back in 2011, 5 of us organised a gathering and we were so interested in earth laws and earth jurisprudence, and then the following year we incorporated as a group because we were passionate about earth laws, and then 10 years later the Australian Earth Laws Alliance is what it is, and it's an interest, it's connecting with others, but it's also having some level of madness to continue in the face of perhaps it's something to get a job. You go and get a job, you're with somebody else, someone pays you, yay. But if you want to build something from nothing, you have to really think about, the possum of persistence, that gentle madness that hangs on to an idea and never lets go. If you've got that weird feeling that something's important, hang on to it and don't let anyone talk you out of it. That's how AELA has been born. That's how NENA has been born. We have made these things from nothing. No one asked us to, no one gave us money. We just did it because the ideas were very important. So whether you call it a gentle madness or just some kind of visionary way of thinking, we really need to do this. And you know what? I don't care how big it gets. There's a few of us here. We think it's important. We're going to continue that. And we built AELA literally out of our bedrooms, and now it's got funding, it's got philanthropic love, it's got people who think it's cool. I think if you have an idea, go with it. If you don't have your own initial ideas, join with others and support them. I love that beautiful video. You can find it if you look it up on YouTube, The Second Dancer. There's this mad guy on a hill and he looks like a weirdo until someone else joins him. Then everybody joins him and suddenly it's fun. And never be afraid to be a second dancer. Even though I initiate a lot of things, I join many other groups and support them as well. And I just want to say that I think that's really, really important. And yes, Scotty's got a great comment. Just begin, quit your bullshit job and create your own. It's not always easy. You do end up wearing the same clothes for 10 years. But anyway, that's enough of that. But just try and join and experiment.
And I just want to acknowledge Jaya's question, which is also floating there, which is, I mean, that's sort of a perfect place to end, Michelle, but Jaya pulls us back into that nasty world of, if you do need to actually change a law to do something, because you literally can't open that bank account without having that legal entity of a cooperative if you want an energy co-op. and you're finding it really painful. You know, we feel your pain really, and that particular story, there's a couple of links I could put in the chat of national organizations that have worked on co-op laws, including in the energy space, the community power energy, for years. And, you know, they made headway for a while. The problem is actually constitutional in some ways, is that the states have power over cooperative laws. So you have to coordinate all the states, and they coordinated in a kind of a national configuration. And then I think it was Queensland started edging out and deciding to.
Queensland's joined now, but anyway, yeah.
Have they joined? Anyway, it's that's, you know, that goes back to that point I was making about we have to toggle between these broad brush kind of really inspiring moments and then channel that energy into the gritty, yucky work of what we once called the Eeyore effect, of bringing the lawyers into the room. So
remember that half of NENA's made up of really cool, energetic lawyers. The co-founders, Bronwen and myself, we're lawyers. There are more and more people thinking structurally that can help. So never fair. If you run into these weird barriers, you just reach out to other people. There are grey areas that we can all push at. And as Janelle Orsi, that wonderful founder of the Sustainable Economies Law Centre, says, there are many grey areas that you can explore. And can I say, I recommend to all of you, when you watch the recordings of this conference, there was a brilliant session yesterday with a bunch of folks in government and those influencing government, talking about the challenges of being innovative inside the bureaucracy. One of them said their policy of work was proceed until apprehended. So they would just try to get things done until they ran into a barrier. I love it. I'm going to put it on my bumper sticker. And so we're going to connect with them more and more and give them energy and support them too, because there are great people trying to push up against those boundaries. So
yeah. And there were some great accountants yesterday as well. So anyway, it's 1 minute past the extended hour. So I'm going to close it up now. And we thank Claire and Kieran, Michelle, Willow, and I'm having a brain freeze.
Kai and Bronwen, we thank you for pulling this session together and having such amazing speakers jammed into just under an hour. Well done, Bronwen.
Yep, fantastic session. Thank you, everybody, and go well, and we'll see you. It reconvenes in half an hour, I believe.
Yeah, we had to do it quick because there were too many proposals. I apologise for the short lunch breaks. As Marcus says, you can blame Michelle, or you can thank Michelle for not saying no to anyone who wanted to be part of the conference. And can I just invite everyone on this panel, make sure you keep in touch with NENA, wherever you've got new web pages or landing pages about your awesomeness, do send it through to us. You know, Kai, we want to promote Regen Melbourne on the homepage. We want to promote Regen Sydney. So keep NENA in touch with all your materials, and we'll do our best to promote them.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody. So just before everyone else jumps off, we have a half-hour break. And then whether you're in Queensland, it starts at 12:30. If you're elsewhere, it could be 1:30 or something else. All of the parallel sessions, you will find them when you log into your program as a registrant. Click on the magic buttons. You can jump in and out of any parallel sessions. Please do join them. Amazing people, amazing sessions. And with a hybrid conference, it's terrific if everyone can join a parallel session. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you after lunch. Huzzah! Did I solve the Zoom link problem for session parallel 1? Thank you, Sue. Yes, everything should, with the grace of the gods of technology, be working beautifully in half an hour. Just click on your magic buttons inside your program, and hopefully it'll work.